The term bread and circuses, panem et circenses, originated with the satirical writings of Juvenal, a Roman poet known for his biting commentary on the social and political realities of his time. It served as a critique of what he perceived as the populace's passivity, their political engagement traded away for material sustenance and entertainment. In Juvenal's view, this exchange reduced the Roman people, once the backbone of the Republic, to spectators and consumers of imperial largesse. This system of provision was not a sudden invention but the culmination of centuries of evolving relationships between the governing elites and the governed. By the time of the Roman Empire, the annona, or grain dole, had become a fixture in the urban life of Rome. The state's provision of grain, later transformed into bread, was a pragmatic response to the logistical challenges of feeding a sprawling urban population disconnected from agricultural production. The Roman plebeians, especially in the capital, came to expect these distributions as their due, a binding element in the unspoken social contract between the emperor and his people. Simultaneously, the spectacular entertainments that defined Roman civic life, such as gladiatorial games, chariot races, and theatrical performances, evolved as both diversions and affirmations of power. These events were not merely indulgences but sophisticated tools of governance. They served to display the emperor's capacity for generosity, echoing the grandeur of conquest and the prosperity of the empire. In providing these, the rulers linked themselves to an ancient tradition of public benefaction, deeply rooted in Roman and Hellenistic customs of civic giving, or evergetism. This intertwining of sustenance and spectacle was more than material support. It embodied the ideology of the Roman state. By ensuring the physical and emotional sustenance of its urban citizens, the empire reinforced the perception of the emperor as a paternal figure, the ultimate guarantor of stability and order. This arrangement, though lauded by some as a means of cohesion, faced scorn from intellectuals like Juvenal, who viewed it as symptomatic of a decline in civic virtue. In his words, the people no longer sought the political freedoms of earlier times, but were content as long as their bellies were full and their senses engaged. This dynamic, forged over generations, created a system where survival and spectacle worked together to secure loyalty and maintain control. The phrase bread and circuses thus crystallized an enduring reality of Roman politics, the power of tangible offerings to pacify, placate, and bind a diverse and sprawling populace under imperial rule. The mechanisms of distribution within the Roman system of bread and circuses were finely tuned instruments of statecraft, reflecting both logistical innovation and the political priorities of the imperial government. At the center of this machinery stood the annona, the system through which grain, and later bread, was distributed to the urban population, particularly in the city of Rome. This practice originated during the Republic and was formalized and expanded under Augustus, whose reforms institutionalized the grain dole as a cornerstone of urban governance. The annona was managed by a specialized bureaucracy, ensuring the steady supply of grain from the provinces to the capital. Egypt, with its fertile Nile delta, became a vital source of this provision, alongside the provinces of North Africa and Sicily. Ships laden with grain traversed the Mediterranean, their safe arrival in Rome ensured by the imperial navy, whose task was to defend these lifelines against pirates and storms. Once in Rome, the grain was stored in vast granaries, such as the Horia built by Augustus, and meticulously rationed to registered citizens. Access to the grain dole was not universal. It was limited to a specific segment of the population, primarily adult male citizens of lower economic standing. Enrollment in the census annoni, or distribution rolls, became a coveted privilege, controlled and occasionally reformed by successive emperors. Recipients collected their shares from designated distribution points, often lined with inscriptions glorifying the generosity of the emperor. Beyond the practicalities of distribution, this system also operated as a performative act of governance. The public nature of the handouts, the ceremonies accompanying them, and the visible presence of imperial representatives transformed what might seem a mundane act of supply into a statement of power and benevolence. The emperor, even when physically absent, was symbolically present in every loaf of bread handed to the masses. Entertainment spectacles followed a parallel logic, designed for both accessibility and grandeur. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters became hubs where Roman citizens of all classes congregated, their entry to the games often subsidized or entirely free, courtesy of the emperor or wealthy elites. These events were intricately scheduled to coincide with significant moments in the political calendar or to placate unrest during times of hardship. The logistics of these spectacles, from organizing gladiatorial matches to constructing elaborate sets for mock naval battles, reflected the empire's vast resources and its capacity for precision. This dual mechanism of sustenance and spectacle was, in effect, a dual promise: the assurance of material security through the grain dole and the provision of emotional and cultural engagement through public entertainments. Together, they formed the operational backbone of Rome's social contract, embodying a sophisticated approach to maintaining stability within one of history's most complex and enduring empires. The political implications of Rome's bread and circuses policy were profound, shaping the dynamics of power between rulers and the ruled while embedding specific ideals of governance within the imperial system. At its core, this practice was not merely an act of generosity but a deliberate strategy to solidify loyalty, stabilize urban populations, and reinforce the ideological foundation of the emperor's authority. Public entertainments, meanwhile, served as highly visible demonstrations of the emperor's power and wealth. Gladiatorial games, chariot races, and theatrical performances were not neutral acts of diversion but calculated displays that projected the grandeur of the state and the magnanimity of its ruler. These spectacles carried implicit messages. The empire was prosperous, the ruler was generous, and the social order was secure under his guidance. The emperor's ability to fund and host such grand events underscored his dominance over Rome's vast resources and his command over its cultural identity. However, the political utility of bread and circuses extended beyond pacification. Public distributions and entertainments became arenas for political messaging. Inscriptions, announcements, and ceremonial appearances allowed emperors to communicate directly with the masses, bypassing traditional elite intermediaries. In this way, the spectacle served a dual purpose: entertaining the public while reinforcing the emperor's singular status as the supreme arbiter of their well-being. The policy also had a darker implication in its subtle erosion of civic engagement. By satisfying the population's immediate needs and diverting attention to grand spectacles, the emperors effectively replaced the participatory political culture of the Republic with a passive dependency on autocratic rule. The forums and assemblies of the Republic gave way to the circus and amphitheater, where the populace's role was no longer to deliberate but to watch, cheer, and consume. In this framework, loyalty became transactional, predicated on the continued flow of grain and games. Emperors who failed to meet these expectations risked their legitimacy and faced the wrath of a dissatisfied populace. Conversely, those who excelled in these provisions secured their positions and often found themselves celebrated in public memory as magnanimous rulers. Thus, bread and circuses was not merely a policy but a central pillar of imperial strategy, intricately woven into the political fabric of Rome's enduring empire. Urban life in ancient Rome was shaped fundamentally by the mechanisms of dependency created through the policies of bread and circuses. Rome, as the epicenter of a vast empire, drew a dense and diverse population from across its territories. By the height of the empire, the city had become an economic and social anomaly, with millions living in close quarters, entirely detached from agricultural production. This disconnection rendered the urban population heavily reliant on state provisions, particularly the grain dole, to sustain daily life. The spatial organization of the city itself reflected this dependency. Public granaries and distribution points dotted the urban landscape, serving as hubs of activity and reinforcing the visible presence of the state in everyday life. These spaces were more than functional. They were symbolic reminders of the emperor's role as the provider. Citizens who gathered for their rations at these sites encountered the physical manifestations of imperial beneficence, complete with inscriptions and dedications that glorified the rulers responsible. Beyond sustenance, Rome's urban environment also reflected the dependency on public entertainment. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters became focal points for social interaction and community identity. These venues were accessible to all classes, creating spaces where the state could engage with its populace through organized spectacles. The dependency on such events extended beyond entertainment to the realm of social cohesion. These spectacles united the city's diverse inhabitants under a shared cultural experience that transcended class and ethnic divides. This structure of urban life created a paradoxical dynamic. On one hand, it fostered a sense of unity and belonging among Rome's residents, as their needs were met through the largesse of the state. On the other, it entrenched a reliance that bound them to the mechanisms of imperial control. The absence of a self-sustaining economic system within the city meant that survival and leisure alike were contingent on the empire's ability to project its power outward, securing resources from its provinces and wealth from its conquests. In this way, the dependency cultivated in Rome's urban life was not only logistical but ideological. The city itself became a microcosm of imperial rule, where the population's everyday existence was intrinsically linked to the emperor's capacity to provide. This intricate relationship between the urban masses and the mechanisms of state provision defined Rome's identity as both the heart of an empire and a testament to the power and complexity of its administrative systems. The social and psychological functions of bread and circuses extended far beyond their material and entertainment value, embedding themselves as essential mechanisms in the fabric of Roman society. These practices did more than address hunger or offer distraction. They played a critical role in shaping collective identity, reinforcing social hierarchies, and maintaining the ideological foundations of imperial rule. At the heart of these functions was the creation of a shared cultural and emotional experience. Public distributions of grain and the grand spectacles of the arena were communal events, bringing together Rome's diverse and often fragmented population into a singular collective. In these moments, distinctions of class, ethnicity, and origin were temporarily set aside, replaced by a common identity as Roman citizens benefiting from the empire's largesse. This unifying effect was vital in a city as vast and heterogeneous as Rome, where cohesion was often tenuous at best. Psychologically, these provisions instilled a sense of security among the urban populace. The grain dole guaranteed that the basic needs of eligible citizens were met, reinforcing trust in the state's capacity to provide. In a world frequently beset by uncertainty, where famine and economic instability could destabilize entire regions, the steady hand of imperial generosity offered reassurance. This sense of stability was not merely practical but deeply emotional, anchoring the masses to the idea that their survival was tied to the emperor's continued rule. The spectacles, meanwhile, served as a stage for emotional catharsis and social bonding. Gladiatorial games and chariot races were more than mere entertainment. They were rituals of collective participation. The roaring crowds in the Circus Maximus or the Colosseum did not simply watch. They became part of the spectacle itself, their reactions feeding into the drama of victory and defeat. These events allowed the populace to experience and express powerful emotions, exhilaration, fear, and awe, in a controlled environment, fostering a sense of belonging and shared humanity. At the same time, the spectacles reinforced social hierarchies. The seating arrangements in the arenas, carefully organized by class and status, served as constant reminders of Rome's rigid social order. While all citizens might enjoy the games, their physical placement in the audience reflected their place within the empire's structure. This duality, of unity in experience yet division in status, was a key feature of the psychological impact of public entertainments. In the context of imperial ideology, Bread and Circuses shaped a populace that was emotionally invested in the stability of the regime. The satisfaction of immediate needs, combined with the grandeur of shared spectacles, created a psychological contract between ruler and ruled. This contract was less about mutual responsibility and more about loyalty in exchange for sustenance and spectacle. It was a subtle but powerful form of control, embedding the legitimacy of imperial rule not just in law or force, but in the daily lives and emotional landscapes of its people. Criticism of Rome's reliance on bread and circuses emerged even in its own time, articulated most famously by Juvenal, whose sharp words cast the populace as willing to trade their political agency for material comfort and fleeting entertainment. To critics like him, these policies reflected a deeper moral and civic decline, a society where engagement in governance and public life had been replaced by a passive dependency on imperial largesse. The grandeur of the Republic, with its traditions of debate and citizen participation, seemed a distant memory, replaced by an autocratic system that, while efficient, encouraged apathy among its people. This critique, however, extended beyond philosophical lamentation. The systemic focus on sustaining the urban populace through grain and spectacles masked deeper structural issues. The annona and public entertainments functioned as short-term solutions to immediate problems, but did little to address the underlying causes of urban poverty or economic disparity. Over time, this approach entrenched a cycle of dependency, where the state's obligation to provide became an expectation that rulers dared not fail to meet. Emperors who faltered in their ability to deliver grain or host sufficient spectacles faced not only public unrest but also potential challenges to their legitimacy. The reliance on spectacle and distribution also placed enormous strain on the empire's resources. The logistical complexity of supplying grain from distant provinces like Egypt and North Africa required a well-maintained infrastructure and stable control over key territories. Any disruption, whether from natural disasters, war, or administrative failure, risked plunging the city into chaos. Similarly, the lavishness of public spectacles grew over time, as emperors sought to outdo their predecessors, turning what was once an effective political tool into a costly arms race of extravagance. In the long term, these practices contributed to a form of fiscal overextension. While they may not have been the sole cause of Rome's eventual decline, they exemplified the systemic pressures that accumulated as the empire expanded. The resources required to sustain Rome's vast population and its penchant for public displays placed increasing demands on provincial revenues and labor. As the empire's capacity to extract wealth and resources diminished, these obligations became harder to fulfill, exacerbating the internal strains on the imperial administration. The cultural significance of the circus in ancient Rome extended far beyond the entertainment it provided, embedding itself as a cornerstone of Roman identity and public life. The Circus Maximus, the largest and most iconic of these venues, was not merely a site for chariot races. It was a physical and symbolic manifestation of Rome's imperial grandeur and social cohesion. It was here, amidst the thunderous roar of tens of thousands of spectators, that the intricate dynamics of Roman society were on full display. Chariot races, the main attraction of the circus, were a spectacle of speed, danger, and skill that captivated the Roman populace. But their importance transcended sport. The races were imbued with political and social meaning, with teams, distinguished by their colors, such as the blues and greens, fostering fierce allegiances among fans. These factions were not merely casual affiliations. They became powerful social entities, capable of influencing public opinion and even participating in political unrest. The circus, therefore, was not only a place of leisure but a venue where collective identity and social rivalries played out in vivid form. The circus also served as a stage for imperial messaging. Emperors, recognizing the unifying potential of these events, often used the games to project their power and benevolence. The processions that preceded the races were meticulously orchestrated displays of imperial authority, featuring statues of gods, emblems of military victories, and representations of the emperor himself. These processions reinforced the ruler's image as both a divine figure and a provider of prosperity and stability, connecting the success of the empire to the personal virtue of its leader. The significance of the circus extended into the realm of public dissent. While it was a space for collective enjoyment, it also provided an outlet for the masses to express discontent. The enormous crowds, gathered in one place, could become a potent force, and chants or demonstrations within the circus were often used to voice grievances against the emperor or his policies. For this reason, emperors paid close attention to the mood of the circus, understanding that public sentiment displayed there could signal broader unrest. In essence, the circus was far more than a venue for races. It was a stage upon which Rome's cultural, social, and political narratives converged. It provided entertainment, reinforced imperial ideology, reflected societal structure, and acted as a barometer for public sentiment. The circus was not just a place. It was a living symbol of the Roman world, capturing its complexities and contradictions in every race, cheer, and chant that filled its stands. Moreover, the ideological impact of Bread and Circuses lingered long after the Roman Empire's decline. It set a precedent for rulers throughout history who sought to pacify their populations through material provision and spectacle. The concept of governance through distraction and dependency, while effective in the short term, left societies vulnerable to stagnation as deeper issues of governance and equity were deferred or ignored. In the end, the legacy of Bread and Circuses stands as a testament to the complexities of balancing immediate public satisfaction with sustainable governance. Its criticism and consequences offer a poignant reflection on the cost of relying too heavily on the superficial satisfaction of needs at the expense of addressing the structural challenges that underpin societal stability. We'd love to hear your thoughts on possible future topics. What areas of human evolution would you like to explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going. As always, our references and further reading are listed in the description below if you'd like to dive deeper into the subject. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. And do not forget, subscribe to The Knowledge.